You remember the last scene of the second part where they were trying to decode what was that message in German written. And somewhere the governor realized that the Neugreben is Newbury. He, gets the name of the place. And what does he say? Yes, it is a big some sort of place, but what? Here we go. He rapped out his orders to the driver. He quickly instructed, he very sharply told him, okay, St. Aldate's police station and step on it. He told him, okay, fine, off to the St. Aldate's police station and drive really fast. Take Jackson and Stephens there. He's not going himself. He's sending the prison officers. And when you get there, ask for Bell, Chief Inspector Bell. He says, ask for Bell. Who's Bell? He's the Chief Inspector Bell. Got that? He says, did you understand? He leaped the stairs to his office 3 at a time. He ran up to his office, taking 3 stairs at a time. He got Bell on the phone immediately and put the facts before him. He called up Bell immediately and he told him everything that had happened. We'll get him, sir, said Bell. We'll get him with a bit of luck. He says, don't worry, we'll definitely catch up. And of course, with a bit of luck should favor, we will definitely catch him. The governor sat back and lit a cigarette. Now, in tension, he started smoking. Ye gods, what a beautifully laid plan it had all been. What a clever fellow Evans was. He just sat to think of it. Oh my God, the plan that he had woven, the plan that he had made was done so beautifully, so flawlessly. There was not a slight mistake. But you know something? There was. What was it? Careless, leaving that question paper behind. Now, he actually shouldn't have left that question paper behind. Why? We all know the reason. The whole plan was put up there. So, obviously, that's the reason, the governor got to know where he is heading and all the stuff. So, careless, leaving that question paper behind. But then, they all made their mistakes somewhere along the line. None of us are perfect. Along the line, somewhere, sometime, we all commit such blunders, such mistakes. Well, almost all of them. And that's why, very, very shortly, Mr. Clever Evans would be back inside doing his once more. He's saying, so, because of that mistake, I'm sure he's going to come back inside. He's going to be back in the prison and he is going to serve his sentence. He's again going to be imprisoned for a longer period. The phone on his desk erupted in a strident burst. Again, the phone erupted as in there was a loud ringing bell. There was a loud phone bell suddenly. And Superintendent Carter informed him that McCleary had spotted Evans driving off along Elsfield Way. They'd got the number of the car, all right, and had given chase immediately, but had lost him at the Headington roundabout. He must have doubled back into the city. Now, if you remember, the Superintendent Carter had actually taken McCleary with him, to the hospital. He told him, and he will also guide you. So, the governor had told him, please make sure you also take him to the hospital for all the wounds that he had got. So, Carter reports to the governor. He says, McCleary actually saw Evans driving off. He spotted him, he found him, driving off along the Elsfield Way. They'd got the number of the car. They had found the number of the car. I mean, they were chasing him. So, obviously, they got the number of the car and they had chased him. But what had happened was he got lost at the Headington roundabout. At the Headington roundabout, somewhere he disappeared. Maybe he's come back into the city, doubled back into the city, as in he's gone back the same way. He's heading back to the city. No, said the governor. No, he's on his way to Newbury. He explained his reasons for believing so and left it at that. He says, I know he's heading to Newbury. Please, he's not coming back into the city. It was a police job now. He says, now it's not my work. Now it is the police who has to chase him and who has to catch him. He was just another good for a giggle, gullible governor, that was all. Now, what was it? How was he feeling at that point of time? Under his strict, supervision, under his tight security, still such a thing happened. So what he calls himself is good for a giggle. Good for a giggle, he is laughable. He is gullible, he is easily deceived. He has been easily cheated, right? He has been easily tricked, and that is why this escape was possible right under his nose. By the way, Carter, I hope you managed to get McClary to the hospital, all right? He says, okay, now you did that, you all missed him, fine. But how is Mr. McClary? Did you actually get him to the hospital to take care of his wounds? Yes, he's in the Radcliffe now. He says, yes, he's in the Radcliffe, that's the hospital. Really groggy, he was groggy as in he was weak and unsteady. He had the terrible pain. When we got to the examination offices and they rang for the ambulance from there, right from there, immediately they called for an ambulance to pick him up. The governor rang the Radcliffe a few minutes later and asked for the accident department. He wanted to make sure that McClary is all right. So, obviously out of humanity, come on, it has happened in front of you and right in your premises. So he calls up there to find out, to see whether everything is all right. McClary, you say? They're asking him, the accident department. Yes, he's a parson. I don't think there's anyone. He says, I don't think there's anyone by this name. Yes, there is. You'll find one of your ambulances picked him up from Elsfield way about. He says, right near that roundabout, from there, your ambulance has actually picked him up also. Oh, that, yes. We sent an ambulance, all right. But when we got there, the fellow had gone. He said, when we went there, the ambulance went to pick him up. There was nobody. The fellow had disappeared. No one seemed to know where he was. Nobody knew actually where he had disappeared. He just vanished, not a sign. He just simply disappeared. Now, another twist, another suspense, another bit of thrill for you. But the governor was no longer listening, and the truth seemed to hit him with an almost physical impact somewhere in the back of his neck. OMG. Now there was this other twist. Now McClary, who was supposed to be McClary, was supposed to be in the hospital because he was hit hard on the head. Why did he disappear? The ambulance went to get him. Why did he disappear? Why and where had he disappeared? The governor just could not think what was happening. But somewhere the truth seemed to hit him with an almost physical impact somewhere at the back of his neck. Somewhere he felt that blow that, okay, still something is much more wrong. And what was that? A quarter of an hour later, they actually found the original McClary. The actual original McClary, the McClary whom we know was taken in the ambulance, he was hit, was not the actual McClary. Twist, climax, get to it. So, after 15 minutes, they actually found him securely bound and gagged. He was totally locked up. He was tied up there in his study in Broad Street. He'd been there, he said, since 8:15 a.m. Since 8:15, somebody had tied him up there. When two men had called, now he was going to say something. Enquiries in Newbury throughout the afternoon produced nothing. They kept inquiring, they kept finding out. There was a lot of investigation happening, but nothing really worked out. There were no results. Nothing at all. And by tea time, everyone in the prison knew what had happened. Obviously, now the word spreads. So by evening, everyone was aware. It had not been Evans impersonating McClary who had walked out. It had been Evans impersonating McClary who had stayed in. Now, the invigilator who came, actually, that was not what he had done. See what he had done. It had not been Evans impersonating, as in pretending to be. McClary, who had walked out. Remember the McClary who had walked out with Stephens? That was not Evans. Evans had not escaped as McClary. You know how Evans had escaped? The McClary who was on the chair, who was hurt, he was bleeding. That was Evans. Now you see the twist. So basically Stephens did not walk out with Evans, disguised as McClary. But it was McClary who was on the chair bleeding. That was actually Evans. The fish and chips were delicious. Now you remember the superintendent had left him, at Radcliffe where the ambulance was supposed to take him. But when the governor finds out, calls up at Radcliffe, they say they didn't find anybody. The ambulance was there and they didn't find anybody. Why? Because that bleeding McClary was actually Evans who had run away from there. So, now where was he? Enjoying himself. The fish and chips were delicious, and after a gentle stroll round the centre of Chipping Norton, Evans decided to return to the hotel and have an early night. He was scot-free. He was absolutely scot-free, and so he enjoyed his fish and chips, he ate his food, he went for a stroll, and he decided to sleep early that night because obviously that thing was, that mental pressure was continuously there. A smart new hat concealed the wreckage of his closely cropped hair. He had bought himself a nice new hat which, hid his that closely cropped hair, the very short hair, and he kept it on as he walked up to the reception desk of the Golden Lion. Now he kept that hat on and he went to the hotel. The hotel was the Golden Lion. It would take a good while for his hair to regain its former glories. Now he had cut his hair just like, how McClary's originally was. So what he did was, now he had to keep his cap on because why? He knew that till actually the hair starts growing properly. So yes, he had to keep the hat on. But what the hell did that matter? I says, how did it matter? It's a hat after all, not a problem. He was out again, wasn't he? Now what mattered was he was a free bird. He had escaped. A bit of bad luck that when Jackson had pinched his scissors, for it had meant a long and tricky operation with his only razor blade the previous night. Now the previous night, if you remember, Jackson had taken away his scissors and he had even asked him, Evans had asked him about it, and he says, yes, I have taken it away, and he was really angry at the same time. Why was he actually angry? Why was Evans angry? Because he had to use it to cut his hair, right? But right now he was left only with the razor. Remember, he told them that I need to shave. Yeah, so with that razor he had actually cropped his hair very, very short. But he'd had his good luck too. Now that bad luck happened because his scissors were taken away. But something good had also happened. And what was that? Just think, if Jackson had made him take his bobble hat off. You remember he told him, take out your hat, and he says, no, this is my lucky charm. I need to let it be there. I'm going to give an exam. So I want this lucky charm. And Jackson, who had this soft heart, was like, it's okay. What will a hat do? Let him have it on. Phew, that really had been a close call. Now there things could have opened up, but thank God it did not. Still, old Jackson wasn't such a bad fellow. He says somewhere he was a good chap. He was, having that courtesy and that humanity. But one of the worst things, funny really, had been the beard. He'd always been allergic to sticking plaster, and even now his chin was irritatingly sore and red. Now the problem was, Evans had a problem with the tape, the plaster tape. Now he had put the beard, you remember. He was allergic to it. It was not matching his skin. It was irritating him. When you're allergic to something, we're all aware. So he was allergic to that sticking plaster, and so putting that beard on his chin, and now obviously now he had escaped, so he had removed it, but his chin was irritatingly sore and red. It was hurting him. There was allergy on his skin. The receptionist wasn't the same girl who'd booked him in, but the change was definitely for the better. Now he's getting naughty here. The receptionist, obviously the person at the front desk at the hotel. Now when he had checked in, there was a different girl, and right now when he went back to the hotel at night to sleep early, there was a different girl, but he was happy with it. Maybe she was more beautiful. As he collected his key, he gave her his best smile and told her he wouldn't be bothering with breakfast. Generally, when you go to hotels, you have your breakfast along with the room. So you can have the breakfast. But he says, don't bother me for the breakfast. I'm not in. I don't want it. He ordered the Daily Express and asked for an early morning call at 6:45 a.m. He says he wanted the newspaper, and he says, okay, early morning, please give me a wake-up call at 6:45 a.m. Tomorrow was going to be another busy day. He whistled softly to himself as he walked up the broad stairs. Now, he was cool, he was calm, he was enjoying himself, and now he was heading up to the room to sleep. He'd sort of liked the idea of being dressed up as a minister dog collar and everything. Now, when he had dressed up as the clergy, as the parson, they wear all those, the dog collar types and all of it. So he was absolutely, feeling good about it. He had liked the idea. Yes, it had been a jolly good idea for McClary to wear 2 black fronts, 2 collars. Now, the McClary which had come there, the fake one, right? Original McClary was locked in the room. The other McClary which had come there, he had come dressed in 2 black fronts and 2 collars. So basically, he had brought him that dress for Evans. Now, you see the plan how it was. But that top collar, phew, it had kept on slipping off the back stud, and there'd been that one panicky moment when McClary had just only got his hand up to his neck in time to stop the collars springing apart before Stephens. Let's recall that scene where, Evans was about to begin the exam, and he asks McClary, is he going to be here in this room and, stare at me? And McClary says, I am not aware. And the governor was listening to the entire scene. So he tells Jackson, okay, you bring Stephens out. Don't let him be there. So that was the scene. So at that point of time when Stephens was yet in the room, he says it was at that point of time when the 2 collars were actually going to come out. They were going to come across. They were just going to get split away and fall. At that point of time, quickly he had kept his hand on the collar. Who? The fake McClary, right? The invigilator. And thank God, Stephens went out, and then they did what they were supposed to. So that was the scene. You can see how beautifully actually they have laid out the plan. They'd got that little problem worked out all right, though. A pen stuck in the mouth whenever the evil eye had appeared at the peephole. Now, you see who's inside the prison right now. It is Evans and the fake invigilator. So, basically both of them, they had planned it up. Now, how they were every, minute, the peephole, the Stephens was watching them. So, what they would do is, he had kept a pen stuck in the mouth. So, he was covering that part sort of thing. So, Stephens could not doubt it. Easy. But all that fiddling about under the blanket with the black front and the stud at the back of the collar, that had been far more difficult than they'd ever bargained for. Everything else had gone smoothly though. Yes, he had asked for the blanket. He said he's feeling cold. Evans had asked for the blanket, you remember? So when he was in the blanket, he was trying to get into those clothes inside, and which had been extremely difficult. They had thought it would be easy, but it was very difficult for him to actually, keep the blanket around and keep changing inside. So yeah, it was definitely difficult with the black front and stud at the back of the collar. That had been far more difficult than they had ever thought. In the car, he'd found everything they'd promised him. Soap and water, clothes, the map. Yes, the map, of course. The Ordnance Survey map of Oxfordshire. He'd got some good friends, some very clever friends. Christ. Now, all that had happened, he had done all this. Now, how it had gone smoothly when he came out. Where? After Radcliffe. Now, we are talking about Evans. He got into the car. He found everything that they had promised him. What? The soap and water. You remember he had to remove the beard and stuff. The blood, obviously. The clothes, the map. Yes, the map, of course. They had this Ordnance Survey map of Oxfordshire. He'd got some good friends, some very clever friends who had helped him out. He unlocked his bedroom door and closed it quietly behind him in the hotel, and then stood frozen to the spot like a man who has just caught a glimpse of the Gorgon. Now, you remember Evans was heading to his hotel room. He told the receptionist, "Wake me up at 6:45, I want to sleep now." He unlocked it, he got into the room, he shut the door behind him, and then another twist. The suspense just doesn't seem to end. And then stood frozen to the spot. As he turned, he shut the door and he turned and he was like, he was frozen to the spot. He couldn't move. Like a man who has just caught a glimpse of the Gorgon. Gorgon, a fierce looking man. He was shocked to see someone whom he had never on earth expected. Sitting on the narrow bed was the very last man in the world that Evans had expected or wanted to see. Who was that man? Can you guess it? Yes, it's not worth trying anything, said the governor. Quietly, as Evans' eyes darted desperately around the room. Now, who was it? The governor. He wasn't a fool. He tried decoding what was happening throughout. He tried to get it, and finally he was there in his room before him. So yes, he saw him. He said, "It's not worth trying anything." He told the governor told him, "Look, it's over. Don't try anything after this." As Evans' eyes, desperately, he's looking around hopelessly. What is happening? How is he here? Can I do something and kill him? I've got men round the place. I've got so many men all round the place. Well, there were only two really. But Evans needn't know that. He said, he told him, "I have men all around the place," but there were actually only two. Why should he know? He let the words sink in. He let the words sink in, as in here he took a pause to increase the impact of a sentence. He paused for a second and then he spoke. "Women too." Did you think the blonde girl in reception was rather sweet? They have specifically mentioned about the receptionist where he found her. When he checked in, there was a different one. Now, in the night when he came back, there was a different one. But he found her very beautiful. He was actually impressed. He gave her his best smile. Evans was visibly shaken. He was highly shocked. He sat down slowly in the only chair this small room could offer and held his head between his hands. For several minutes, there was utter silence. For quite a few minutes, both of them did not speak. Finally, he spoke. "It was that bloody correction slip, I suppose." He then realized, what mistake had I committed? How the hell did this governor know I am going to be here? Then he realized that correction slip, he had left it over there. Well, the governor failed to mask the deep satisfaction in his voice. There are a few people who know a little German. He says, I'm one of them. You know, I also know a little bit of German, so I could decode it. Slowly, very slowly, Evans relaxed. He was beaten and he knew it. He knew he had lost the battle. He knew it was over. The game was absolutely over. He sat up at last and managed to smile ruefully. He somehow managed to smile. You know, it wasn't really a mistake. Now he's trying to cover it up. He's saying, you know what? Actually, that wasn't a mistake. You see, we ain't been able to fix up any hotel, but we could have worked that some other way. He says, actually, the problem was we had not been able to get any hotel. So there was this issue which we faced and we couldn't work it out, you know, from the same, some other way. So the really important thing was for the phone to ring just before the exam finished. Now there was some way they had to distract the governor. So you remember he had got a phone call. So that phone had to ring before the exam finished to get everyone out of the way for a couple of minutes. You remember he had told him the last 3 minutes are very important. This is what had happened. The phone had come. Stephens also got distracted. Governor got distracted. And till they could get back into their senses, these guys had done everything. So we'd to know exactly when the exam started, didn't we? So we exactly wanted to know, actually the time mattered to us, when it will start, when it will end. And like a fool, I presented you with that little piece of information on a plate. He's saying, I literally did that to you. I gave it to you. I literally served it to you on a plate. Well, somebody did. So you see, sir, that correction slip killed 2 birds with a single stone. How and what? You killed 2 birds, you achieved 2 objectives at one time. So 2 things happened at the same time. The name of the hotel for me and the exact time the exam started for air, and you know, he stopped there. The governor nodded. It's a pretty common word. Good job. It is pretty common, sir, or I'd never have known where to come, would I? He says, come on, this thing is very common. Otherwise, how do you think I would know where I have to come? Nice name though, Zoom Goldenen Lewin. You remember this correction had come. As a correction, he told him it's not Goldin, it's Goldenen. And I had explained to you the adjectives for German and French. So this is the same thing. You remember that I told you it means the golden lion even then. So this was the name of the hotel, right? This is where the correction slip had brought. How did you know which golden lion it was? There's hundreds of them. He's saying there are so many of them. Now, Evans is asking, he's just trying to, get to the governor. How did he come to know there are so many, hundreds of them in this place? How did he know which one am I in? Same as you, Evans. Index number 313, center number 271. Remember? You remember that invigilator when he had walked in and he made him start writing the exam. He told him, write this in the top left corner, put this number here, put this number there. So he was guiding him through basically. 6 figures. And if you take an ordnance survey map for Oxfordshire, you find that the 6-figure reference 313/271 lands you bang in the middle of Chipping Norton. He says, now I put everything together. I put the 2 numbers together, they became a 6-figure number. Now when you put this on the survey map, on the ordnance survey map, this when you put together, it brings you right in the middle of Chipping Norton. This is how I found you. Yeah, you're right. We opened, you'd run off to Newbury. He's saying, actually what I hoped was, remember he was saying, governor told him in the end, the Newbury is the place, he is going there. We did. Well, that's something, I suppose. He says, yes, actually I did. I even told the people to run there, but then we had got out of inquiries. We did not get any information there. That question paper, Evans, could you really understand all that German? I could hardly. He's saying that question paper, I who had studied German, couldn't understand. Did you? Nah, of course I couldn't. Of course not. I didn't. I knew roughly what it was all about. But we just hoped it throw a few spanners in the works, sort of muddle everybody a bit. So the way we had planned, we thought that it would create hurdles. It would make some difficulties while in my plan. It would create some sort of difficulties, sort of muddle everybody, sort of confuse everybody a bit. So that paper basically was to create obstacles, hurdles, and to confuse everybody. The governor stood up. Tell me one thing before we go. How on earth did you get all that blood to pour over your head? Now this conversation, both of them are actually trying to, check each other's intelligence. How were you so clever enough to do all these things? How could the governor land up there? The governor is asking him questions. How did you manage to pour that blood on your face, over your head? Evans suddenly looked a little happier. He was like, oh, now it's my turn. I was clever. He didn't know it. Clever, sir. Very clever that was. How to get a couple of pins of blood into a cell when there's none there to start off with, and when the invigilator, shall we say, gets searched before he comes in. Yes, sir. You can well ask about that. I don't know if I ought to tell you. After all, I might want to use that particular. He said, see, it was very clever of us to have done it. So basically when the invigilator walked in, right, the pins of blood, the pint is the measurement, of getting the liquid measurement when you measure the liquid in pins. So yeah, so he says when there's none to start off with, and when the invigilator, shall we say, gets searched before comes in. Now before the invigilator was about to come in, that was the time. You can well ask, but I'm not sure if I should tell you this. After, I might want to use that particular, maybe I want to use it for the next escape. Anything to do with a little rubber ring for piles, perhaps? He reminds him, remember that ring that was there? And he told him at the sitting position, he had got some swollen nerves. And because of that problem, he had carried that tube. Well, in that tube was the blood. Evans grinned feebly. Clever though, wasn't it? He says, of course, you got me right. Yes, it was in that tube. But weren't we clever enough to do it? Must have been a tricky job sticking a couple of pins. He's saying, I'm sure it must have been a very tricky job. Nah, you've got it wrong. No problem at all, sir. It was extremely easy for us to do it. No? Nah, it's the clotting, you see. That's the big trouble. The big trouble was the gel-like lumps of blood, the clotting which had to happen. Actually, that was the problem. We got the blood easy enough. They got it in the tube. Pig's blood. It was the pig's blood from the slaughterhouse in Kidlington. Now, he's even going to tell him where they got the blood from, and it belonged to the pig. But to stop it clotting, you've got to mix your actual blood. He says, now the blood would have got clotted. Obviously, in the tube, the blood will not remain in the liquid form. It will get clotted. So with that, we had to actually mix some original blood. Evans took a breath. With 1/10 of its own volume of 3.8% trisodium citrate. Didn't know that, did you, sir? He says, with that, we had to also mix, some percent of trisodium citrate. I'm sure you're not aware. The governor shook his head in a token of reluctant admiration. He said, okay, now this was something I wasn't aware. So he was admiring him, but he didn't even want to show it. We learn something new every day, they tell me. Come on, my lad. He says, okay, now this is something new I learned from you. So every day is learning, every moment we all learn. So he tells him, okay, this is new, I learned it from you. But now, let's go. Evans made no show of resistance. Now, he did not try to, stay back or pull himself back. He did nothing. And side by side, the two men walked slowly down the stairs. Both of them very coolly, they walked down the stairs. Tell me, Evans, how did you manage to plan all this business? Now his inquiry, his questions are not over. He wants to dig out from him everything. How did he actually plan it? And this is what it is. You've had no visitors. I've seen to that. You've had no letters. He's saying, how did you communicate with people? I've got lots of friends though. He says, I couldn't, there were no calls, there were no letters, but yes, I do have a lot of friends. What's that supposed to mean? He's saying, so what? Me, German teacher for a start. Do you remember the German teacher? You mean, but he was from the technical college. Was he? Evans was almost enjoying it all now. Ever check up on him, sir? He says, did you ever try checking on him? God Almighty, there's far more going on than I. He says, oh my God, I did not even realize this. Always will be, sir. He says, there's lots more to it, sir. Always the case. Everything ready? Said the governor. He asked the governor as they stood by the reception desk. Whom is he asking? The van's out the front, sir, said the pretty blonde receptionist. Blonde, these people, the foreigners who have the blonde hair, the golden hair. So he's asking her, is everything ready? And she says, the van's out the front, sir. The van is right there for you. Evans winked at her. He had liked her, remember? And she winked back at him. It almost made his day. They exchanged winks. A silent prison officer handcuffed the recaptured Evans, and together the two men clambered awkwardly into the back seat of the prison van. Now they clambered here, they climbed in a very awkward manner and they sat back in the prison van, in the back seat of the prison van. Both of them landed up there. See you soon, Evans. It was almost as if the governor was saying farewell to an old friend after a cocktail party. It was that feel that they had a great time and now his friend was going. They had a great time at the cocktail party. You have a party organized, with your business people or for business purposes. So he enjoyed that time with him and now he was bidding him farewell. Cheerio, sir. I was just wondering. I know your German's pretty good, sir, but do you know any more of these modern languages? And he's like, okay, bye-bye, sir. But I'm glad I know your German's pretty good. Like you could decode that entire message. But do you know any more of these modern languages? Not very well. Why? Evans settled himself comfortably on the back seat and grinned happily. Nothing. Really. I just append to notice that you've got some O-level Italian classes coming up next September. That's all. Well. Did you understand that line? So remember, Evans told them that I want to learn German. And so for 1 month, he had got the training. The teacher kept coming, the so-called teacher, which was not actually a teacher. And so he tells him, well, I think you have some Italian classes coming up, the O-level Italian classes coming up next September. That's all. So he's trying to tell him that, okay, now next year, I'm going to learn Italian and probably play the same trick. Perhaps you won't be with us next September, Evans. He says, maybe, who knows, next September, you will not be with us. James Roderick Evans appeared to ponder the governor's words deeply. He started thinking deeply. What is he trying to tell me? Where will I be next September if I will not be in the prison? No, perhaps I won't, he said. As the prison van turned right from Chipping Norton onto the Oxford Road, the hitherto silent prison officer unlocked the handcuffs and leaned forward towards the driver. For Christ's sake, get a move on. It won't take them long to find out. He just opened his and he says, okay, keep moving fast. They will never know. Where do you suggest we make for? Asked the driver in a broad Scots accent, in a very nice and very thick and highly recognizable accent. What about Newbury? Suggested Evans. He says, why not the Newbury? So when the governor told him that maybe next September you won't be there with us, and he started thinking deeply. He's saying, why did he mean that? What did he mean by saying that? He says, maybe I won't. Now, as the prison van turned right from Chipping Norton onto the Oxford Road, the hitherto silent prison officer unlocked the handcuffs and leaned forward towards the driver. For Christ's sake, get a move on. It won't take them long to find out. Do you know what's happening? Do you still know? Still, this is the last part of the chapter and still there is a twist. Still there is climax. Still there is suspense. And what is it? Watch it. So, when, Evans was there in the back seat, handcuffed, as soon as, the governor let him go there in the prison van, governor did not join him. He went away in his car. As he sat there, the prison officer was silent in the car, and what he did was he opened his handcuffs. He opened his handcuffs and he leaned ahead towards the driver and he told him, really move fast now. They will come to know very fast. What will they come to know? Where do you suggest we make for? Asked the driver in a broad Scots accent. The driver said, oh, where should we head for? Can you please tell me, where should I drive off to? And Evans suggested, what about Newbury? So do you get it? The prison officer in this van and the driver of this so-called prison van were no one else other than Evans' friends. And so, yes, he has escaped once again. Imagine the governor had nearly got him. All that he had to do was get him to the prison. But at the last minute, once again, the cunning Evans made his escape with his friends. Wow, that was a roller coaster. It was so much. There was so much of thrill to the story. I hope you have watched the entire one. And yes, what is it giving you? What are we concluding with? Never trust to general impressions, my boy, but concentrate yourself upon details. He says, don't just trust. In fact, concentrate on every detail before you trust anybody for anything. So yes, you have to keep trusting me because yes, I am right here always, clearing all your doubts. So keep watching and keep learning.